What's up, Royals? I'm Kai. Hope you're doing well. A couple weeks back, I made a video about this DIY rack. Now, the focus of that video was really this pull-out table. It's a feature that I haven't done before, and I wanted to bring it to you guys, something that you can think about for your next DIY rack. However, I got a lot of questions and comments regarding the build of the rack in its entirety. So that's what this video is about. I'm not going to rebuild the entire rack, but I will go over the measurements and the cuts and the assembly process. So stay tuned. Before we get started, I want to give you a quick update on this rack. Where we left off in the last video, this wood was completely untreated. So I did mention that it's a good idea to add some layer of protection. What I did with this, I added some mineral oil, just rubbed it in, nothing too drastic. It didn't really change much of the appearance, although it did bring out some of the grains, and I kind of like that. I'm going to leave it the way it is until I can find something creative to do with it. As for the heating, I added the heating elements to the bottom two levels. Since I only have one snake that really needs to go into a 41 quart tub, 2 levels is plenty. It only needs one, and I have still space to grow. I may add a few more levels to this rack in the future. You see I already have the tubs, so I may add 4 or 5 more levels depending on what I do with this other species that I'm keeping in here, which are boa imperators. Anyway, now let's move on to how I constructed it and all the cuts and the details and all that stuff. So let's go. In the last video, I focused more on this sliding table. So for this one, we're going to focus on everything else that goes into building this rack. And if we want to do that, we have to first take a look at the tub size that we want to purchase and then build the rack appropriately to fit the tub. The tubs that I'm using are 41 quarts, and you can use whatever size tubs that you want. Just make sure they're suited for your animals. If you're using the exact same one that I have, which are 41 quart Sterilite tubs that I picked up from Walmart, then you can use the measurements that I'll be posting on the screen. However, if you're using any other type of tub, size of tub, then you'll need to know how to measure the tub. So for that, I'm going to show you exactly what I did to get all the measurements. Now, since this is a fairly long tub and the corners, not the corners, but the lip is rolled, it's really hard to know where is the exact height. What is the exact height of the tub, because the lips are rounded. So to do that, simply take something that you know for sure is straight and put it on top like that. Now you have a hard edge to take a measurement from, and you can just simply use your tape measure and touch that to the ground or surface, and then take a measurement. Then you'll know exactly what the height is of the tub. If you have a long tub like mine, you might want to take a couple measurements. It's important to take the measurements near the corners. So I took one here and I took one on the other corner. They came out to be roughly the same, about a 1/16 of a difference in some areas. And on one of the tubs, for some reason, there is a 1/8 of an inch difference. But I just took the average, and that number will be posted on the screen. That's the height of the tub. Next up, you want to get the length and the width, and that's much simpler. You simply have to use a ruler or tape measure in this case and get the width of the tub, and I'll post that on the screen as well for this particular model of the tub. And again, I took a couple measurements, one here and one at the end. The measurement that I took in the middle, because it's such a long tub, it does bow a little bit, so that's going to be wider and it's not going to be accurate. So that's why I took a measurement on this side and on that side near the corners. It came out to be almost exact. Also, you want to take a measurement of the length, and for that I took one like this. So that is the measurement you see on the screen right here. I also did one in the center, and then I kind of just took the average of those. And then that is the length, width, and height of the tub. I want to pause for a second and just explain how to read a ruler, because I've had some conversations with people and it turns out there's just some confusion around the lines on a ruler. So here we're going to use inches, which are the lines across the top. So we have in between an inch, so we're going to start with 1 and 2. We have this long line in the center. So that's the ½ inch mark. Most of you know that. And then half of that is this mark here. So there's a ½ inch mark. So that's first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and then you have the whole, which is your fourth quarter. 4 over 4 equals 1. In between the quarter mark is this line, and that's what we call the 1/8 line. So if you count the number of these lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, these are all in eighths. So that's 7/8 and 8/8. So that's a whole as well. In between the eighths are the 1/16. So in between this line and the 1 inch mark, that is 1/16. So if you count these, they have 1/16, 2/16, 3/16, 4/16, 5/16, 6/16, so on and so forth. Now the reason I point that out is because some rulers actually don't have those marks. So I was having a discussion with somebody and they were measuring the 16ths, but they came out long, like really long. And what I found out was they only had eighths. So they were counting, they thought these were 16ths, and they were counting, I think, 7/16, but they were counting eighths instead. So instead of getting to the point that they were trying to get to, they went beyond. So just take that into account. Also, if we go a little bit step further, in between the 16ths are the 32s. So these are these tiny little marks right there. So that's 32. So that's 132, 232, 332, 432, so on and so forth. You'll get to 32, 32. Another thing to watch out for is that not all tape measures have all of these marks throughout the entire tape measure. So if we go further down, you can see that the 32s are gone. So we still have the ½ inch, we still have the quarters, we still have the eighths, and we still have the 16ths. But the 32s are gone. So just pay attention to that when you're going through and taking measurements. Although now we have the measurements of the tub, we can't use those numbers exactly. We have to give ourselves a little bit of padding so that the tub can slide in and out very easily. So we take the width that we got and we add a ½ inch just to give ourselves a little bit of wiggle room. We also want to add about a ½ inch to the length so that this lip can be pushed all the way in and we have a tiny bit of an overhang right here. Lastly is the height. The height is the one that gives me the most problems or requires the most attention. We do want a slight gap. As you can see right here, there's a gap. Because these tubs, like I said, are so long, there's a little bit of a variation in all the heights. And also because the animals that are going in here, which are my boas, require a little bit more ventilation than the ball pythons. So what I've done is, instead of a 1/8 inch gap, like I typically do on my other racks, this is a little bit more than 1/8. It's more than 1/8, but it's not quite a full quarter. I'll put the measurement of that on the screen as well. So now that we have the length, width, and height, we can go about determining the measurements for all the pieces that we have to cut. We'll start with the piece down here. This is a ½ inch piece of plywood that I painted white to match the rest of the rack. Since this piece is on the very bottom and we have these uprights that sit on top of the piece,
that means the bottom panel needs to be 1 inch wider than the rest of the pieces in here. Because as you can see, these pieces butt up to the side panels, the uprights, while the bottom piece sits below the upright. So this is sitting on top of the bottom one. So this width has to be 1 inch wider. The length of the bottom piece remains the same as what we have calculated. Now for these pieces, the width and the length is exactly the same as what we've calculated. So we have 1, 2, and then you can't see in the camera, but 3, 4, 5 pieces that go in the middle for this particular rack. Now, as for the top panel, its measurements are exactly the same as the bottom panel because it overlaps the 2 side uprights. So that's a 1/2 inch upright, and this is also 1/2 inch width upright. So 1/2 inch plus 1/2 inch is 1 inch, which is why we have to add a full inch to the width of the top panel. The length is the same as what we have in our measurements.
Now, once you add up all the heights of all these pieces, you're going to add them all together. However, just like we did when we got the width and the length, we added a 1/2 inch. I don't recommend adding 1/2 inch to the height, but you still want to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. So I think I added about probably 1/16 or 1/8 of an inch to the overall height, because I know when I cut these pieces, they're not going to be perfect. And I can always shave off a little bit off each of their heights, but you can't stretch these pieces to be longer. So a little tip is to just cut it slightly longer than you need, and then you can shave some off with a hand planer if they turn out to be a little bit too long. This metal strip is part of the table, and I already talked about that in the previous video, so make sure you watch that if you want to build this pull-out table. Now, assuming you have all these pieces measured and cut out, let's continue talking about these uprights because they are the most important pieces to this build. All the pieces, interior pieces, top and bottom, all attached to the uprights. So we need to make marks on these uprights so we can precisely know where to attach all these other pieces. The bottom piece goes on the bottom end of the upright, which is fairly explanatory. And the top piece goes on the very top. That's easy. Before I continue, I want to show you, this is a corner clamp. And I use this throughout the entire build. Anytime I'm attaching these 2 pieces together, so the bottom and the uprights, or the interior pieces and the uprights, anytime I'm attaching those together, I use these corner clamps. They really act as a second set of hands. Now, I purchased 4 of these, and I found that having multiple corner clamps laid around the room where I'm working was really a great help because they were an arm's reach away. But really, I only needed 2, and I was only using 2 at a time for this build. So the way they work is you have these pieces that adjust and tighten the corner clamps. And as you can see, when I rotate this, that little piece right here, this is going to move. So it's going to close or open. So this loosens it, and then this clamps it down onto your material. And there's 2 slots here. There's 1 slot here and 1 slot here. That's where the 2 pieces of material go. And this is a perfect 90-degree. So this pretty much just clamps on to these 2 pieces. And then when you tighten it, they hold it together, and you can let go, and your hands are free to work on other areas, such as picking up the drill, changing the drill bit, grabbing your screws, lining things up, so on and so forth. So the corner clamps really came in handy. So what I did prior to assembling anything is I took all the uprights and I laid them out on the floor, and I used a ruler and marked where to attach the center shelves to. And if you look closely, there's a pencil mark right there, and there's a pencil mark right there. And how I made that mark is I took the height of the tub plus the gap in here plus the thickness of the material. And the measurement that I got is what I used to mark this. Now, one thing to remember is which side of the mark
to attach the board, the PVC board. You don't want to accidentally attach it to the wrong side. So I had to make a little note inside the upright. In here, I put an X. You can't see it now because this piece is covering it. If you accidentally attach the board to the other side, well, then that just makes this extremely tall. You'll have a huge gap where the animal can get out. And then this will be extremely short and to the point where you can't even put in the tub. So make sure you put the board, assemble it, and attach it to the right side, correct side of the mark. So again, it's the height, the gap, plus the thickness of the board. That is where you put the first mark. And then you take that same measurement and you start here and make your second mark. And I did that on all 6 uprights. The screws that I use are number 6, 1 1/4 inch, and they're flatheads, Phillips screws. This way they can sit flush with the material. I actually embed a few of these a little bit further down. And the reason I use those is because I have limited space in my snake rack. So when I put racks side by side, I want to make sure they can butt up against each other. If you use these screws that are domed, that kind of stick out, then they don't really butt up against each other and you're just wasting a little bit of space, but that's just me. The top and bottom panels are attached to the uprights with the same type of screws. That way it sits flush with the surface and you don't have to worry about anything gets snagged or scratched. I hope that answers many of your questions, and if I can think of anything else, I will add those down in the description section. So when you are ready to build this rack, make sure you come back to this video and check the descriptions down below for any additional information. That about wraps it up for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. If you're new to this channel and you want to be informed of future uploads, make sure you're subscribed and ring that notification bell. As always, thanks for watching. Please share and remember, Royals for life. Peace out.